Alan Hume was born in 1829, and like his father, the MP Joseph Hume, he was a radical liberal with a keen sense of justice. At 20, Hume joined the Indian Civil Service, where his work ethic and talent in working with locals eventually led to a very senior position. Hume's outspokenness and his concern for millions of Indians put him at odds with the British self-interest, and he was demoted. After retiring from government, he began supporting Indian national politics, which led to the formation of the Indian National Congress. I was amazed that they had a picture of the first gathering of the Indian National Congress in 1885, and there was a white man in the middle who I found out was Alan Hume, and I thought, how could I know nothing about this person? And here's his history, which maps onto kind of history of empire on my doorstep, and I thought it'd be great if we could share that and explore that.
I was just fascinated that in this little corner of South London there was someone who played such a leading role in the founding of the Indian National Congress, and I found that incredibly admirable, that in between, living amongst us are these real heroes, and we don't really often see them.
I've found this stamp of A.O. Hume, which was produced by India in the 1970s. I think the exact date on here is 1973. And since finding out about his contributions in the towards the setting up of the Congress Party in India, you know, I'm absolutely fascinated by this guy. And he was a colonialist, but he's actually respected in India today because he wasn't just there to exploit India. He actually believed in India getting independence later, and he wanted to make a contribution towards India gaining independence, and I find this quite fascinating.
The commemorative stamp has moving words about Hume's significance to India. It reads, "As an administrator with a deep insight and understanding of the problems of rural India, as a friend of Indian peasantry, as a champion of the aspirations of the Indian people for self-government, and as the foremost advocate of India's unity and nationhood, Hume carved out for himself a place of affection in the hearts of the Indian people."
He was very much part of the empire, but at the same time he saw the other side of things, and he did a lot to encourage people poorer than himself and more defenceless. People at the time might have found him very, very radical, but looking at it from both sides, both from the empire and the enemies of the British Empire, he was very much central and very much between the two.
I think, so the whole question of how do you get people to come together, share a vision and work together and to move it forward, I think Hume was exemplary in that, in his ability to go around India and be in contact with newspaper editors, senior people, educated people, and try and make them think of how as a collective they can wield more power and can move towards something, producing social change far more and greater above to be compartmentalized. And to me, that's inspiration, And I'm not saying that Hume is the be-all and end-all of Indian independence, far from it, but Hume is significant in that story in terms of how you begin to try and enact change. And in that context, it was to do with getting the Indian people to galvanize themselves to move towards greater self-government. In 1883, Hume wrote an open letter to the graduates of Calcutta University, cajoling and imploring them to act. Part of that letter read, "If you, the picked men, the most highly educated of the nation, cannot, scorning personal ease and selfish objects, make a resolute struggle to secure greater freedoms for yourself and your country, a more impartial administration, a larger share in the management of your own affairs, then we, your friends, are wrong and your adversaries are right."
When he returned from the Indian service, when he was a major figure in the evolution of the Indian National Congress, and he was a great diplomat and a very powerful personality, but from the moment he narrowed his focus to British plants, he was someone who could inspire, he was someone who could assist and somehow make things happen. So the main thing that I see when I look at Hume is a very powerful figure who would brush aside people trying to slow him down and try and harness their abilities and tried to work for what he thought was a good purpose.
The beginnings of my fascination with Hume is clearly because of Hume's immensely important bird collection, which is the largest single donation of bird specimens ever received by the Natural History Museum. It is the foundation of all research on Indian subcontinent birds right up to the current day.
While he was still working as a civil servant in the British government in India, around 200 of his papers, notes and letters were published. He also founded and edited the journal Stray Feathers and wrote 4 books including The Game Birds of India, Burma and Ceylon. His brilliance in building networks is exemplified by his collection of over 100,000 bird and egg specimens. These were collected by himself and other British civil servants dotted across India who shared in Hume's passion for nature.
The South London Botanical Institute, I think, can only have been here because of his powerful personality for standing in these walls now. And it was 100 years and more now ago when he actually founded the Institute, and it's still going strong, and it's still, to my way of thinking, provides a very strong social need. People want to relate to plants again. We lost touch with them during the height of the plastic age, and we're now coming a bit to our senses, and we want to know. We want to know history. We want to have a feeling of connection with plants. And Hume did all that, and he's given it to us. And this is why I feel so thankful to him and honour his memory.
I would say perhaps more than anything else, the things that he was interested in, like plants and birds, those are the things that I've always been interested in and lived for many years very close to this institute. Came in here once many years ago, left terribly depressed, and then years after, that was when I was quite young, and then years afterwards came back and felt totally inspired by the institute that he had founded, by the library, by the herbarium and the garden, and the whole place and the atmosphere, a delightful atmosphere where not too much has changed, so that it has a flavour of the time when he founded it, really.
Hume started this little project of his when he was 70 years old. That's when he first conceived of the idea. And when I came to the SRBI, I met numerous people who were in the latter part of their years, who were actually doing incredible amounts of good work. And for me, I think we should value older people more. And I think just because of my own experiences here of meeting older people who are making a significant contribution to society, and then Hume they're all in this mold of older people who can do incredible things later in life.
It's got this flavor of, old dusty collector local thing, and on the other hand, I find it is quite topical and quite relevant today.
In the Natural History Museum, with the assistance of the South London Botanical Institute, we organised the centenary conference celebrating the death of Alan Octavian Hume. The idea being to bring together people with a whole array of different insights into different facets of his character, different parts of his achievement, to bring together to make the man as a whole live. He was a man of many parts, but the sum of all the parts is greater than the individual bits.
He was the kind of person, I think, that we've got too few of these days, who covered a huge spectrum of interests, and all of them dealt with in a most enthusiastic and conscientious way, from his natural history to his politics.
I feel inspired by him and his story. One of the things that we want to do with someone we think is great is to idolise them and to idealise them. But I think in Hume's story, the more I go into it, the more I look at it and share my findings with other people who are researching him, is he was a very complex character. In many ways, he was someone that you wouldn't necessarily want to have an argument with or to spend too long debating a subject. On the other hand, he was obviously someone who could inspire you, and he inspired so many people, often people who were shy and introverted or like working alone. But whatever the process was, he managed to inspire them, and things were achieved by his inspiration that would never have happened. And without him, the botanical clock in Cornwall, for one thing, would have been set back by 50 or more years.
The plants he's collected, they're here, they're being digitized. You know, if you're interested in kind of botany, there's a resource here. There's a library here, which is open to the public on Thursdays if you want to come here. But for me personally, I'm interested in the perspective of, by looking at the past, we can begin to explore in and of itself what was going on at the time, but that also shows us in terms of its presence, its traces around us now. You know, perhaps this institute, the South London Botanical Institute, wouldn't have been here if Hume hadn't had this time in India, if he hadn't had that contact with other forms of thought or other ways of viewing the world. I don't know. I mean, but there's a connection, you know. But I think when you look back, you see what's relevant to the present, and that's what I think is exciting about this project. And hopefully, you know, people find out more about the institute and what it does and about its kind of its founder. Then you begin to consider those things and see how the past is still present. And that's almost like a cliche, but it is present. But it's discovering the ways it is present, and making those visible. And that's what I find really exciting about this place. And on top of that, it's got the most tranquil garden there. So I live in Herne Hill, and I live locally south East London, and I think you're blessed if you live near a garden, and having the small garden here is another blessing.